Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to all types of warships explained. I don't know the difference between any of them apart from aircraft carriers, because they're the ones that I've looked into recently, and also in the past I did a few videos related to them as well. But other than that, I don't really know anything about any of them. So yeah, this is going to be me learning about a lot of these for the first time. But yeah, these military base or type reactions, you seem to be enjoying them, so I'm going to keep them coming. I don't know what other sort of things you want me to see, but 99% of things related to this content, I don't have a clue. So it's all first-time reactions. So pretty much whatever you want me to see, it will be new to me. But that was a little rhyme. But yeah, we're going to get into this reaction. Hopefully, going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my reactions to different content that I can't post to YouTube, like movies and stuff. But yeah, links are in the description for those interested in that. But let's check this out and see the differences in all of these.
4.5 acres of sovereign and mobile American territory. That's how the US Navy describes their Nimitz-class carrier. Most people know what an aircraft carrier or a submarine is, but there are 7 categories of modern warship, which consists of aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, corvettes, amphibious assault ships, and submarines.
What about battleships?
Oh well, a battleship was a large armored warship with large caliber guns. They were the most powerful type of warship during the late 19th and early 20th century. But as newer types of warships started traveling the blue waters, battleships faded away, with the last one being decommissioned at the end of the Cold War.
Oh, wow.
And how about the other?
No more audience questions during the video. That's what the comments section is for. So once your voyage through this video is over, you'd know why destroyers are called as such, even though all warships have the power to destroy. And you would finally know what differentiates these classes of ships from one another. Or will you? The first aircraft carriers became operational in the early 1920s, storing, launching, recovering, and servicing aircraft at sea. Enabling a nation with airborne operations far away from home and close to the enemy is very advantageous for obvious reasons. A single supercarrier holds enough firepower to rival the entire air forces of some nations.
What? Wait. Did I hear that correctly? I know there's a lot of power on these things, but that is mental. It is just like a living small nation on a boat, pretty much.
A carrier air wing is able to perform over 150 strike missions at once, hitting over 700 targets a day. But they can also protect friendly forces, conduct electronic warfare, assist in special operations, and carry out search and rescue missions. Supercarriers can accommodate 4,000 to 5,000 personnel, including the ship's company, air wing, and other support staff. Even though aircraft carriers do have surface-to-air missiles, guns, and other armament, they usually do not travel alone. Instead, they travel with a fleet composed.
So yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because you always see them and they're always with other ships. I'm guessing all the other ships are the ones he's mentioned in the intro, and now we're going to learn about each individual one, I assume.
Of other classes of military ships called the Carrier Strike Group, which is typically made up of an aircraft carrier, at least 1 cruiser and 2 destroyers or frigates, and a carrier air wing of 65 to 70 aircraft. A carrier strike group could also on occasion include submarines, logistic ships, and a supply ship. An aircraft carrier often acts as the command platform for large battle groups or multinational task forces. Aircraft carriers traditionally ran on diesel fuel, but some of the newer aircraft carriers are nuclear powered. In colonial times, a cruiser would have been cruising the world, showing off their flag and representing the overwhelming force that could be brought to bear far from home. The name has stayed, but the role is not exactly just cruising around anymore. During the period between the end of the First World War in 1918 and the beginning of the Second World War in 1939, also known as the interwar period, cruisers were limited by treaty to a maximum size of 10,000 tons. 2 types were defined by treaty. The heavy cruisers carried anywhere between 8 to 10 8-inch guns, and the light cruisers carried 12 to 15 6-inch guns. But both heavy and light cruisers carried a heavy battery of secondary and anti-aircraft guns. In wartime, cruisers were to operate alone on the high seas to interdict enemy commerce, but also to protect the battle line against enemy light cruisers. These were mostly heavy cruiser roles, but both types of cruisers usually had top speeds in excess of 30 knots. Today's cruisers are primarily guided missile warships, ranging in size anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 tons. Only the world's largest navies can afford to build and operate modern cruisers, principally the United States and Russia. In today's world, the role of the cruiser depends on the navy that it's employed in. In the US Navy, cruisers are primarily an anti-air defense vessel, while in the Russian Navy, they're anti-ship platforms. Other missions include commerce
Did
raidings
you see the size of that rocket?
and shore bombardments.
Oh shit!
Even though
What's that going back.
Other missions
Bro, that's a chunky ass missile.
include commerce raidings and shore bombardments. Even though the US Navy at some point had a number of nuclear-powered cruisers in its fleet, they were all decommissioned in the 90s since they were deemed too expensive to build and maintain. Okay, enough cruising, let's move on to destroyers. Before we talk about destroyers, we need to briefly talk about torpedoes. In 1866, an English engineer called Robert Whitehead invented the first effective self-propelled underwater torpedo, eponymously named Whitehead torpedo. At the time, battleships were heavily armored and protected against gunfire, but only above the waterline. So the invention of Whitehead torpedoes changed everything. Suddenly, there was a weapon that could be carried on a small, fast and relatively inexpensive boat called a torpedo boat that could strike a large ship underwater, bypassing all its armor protection. A torpedo had the potential to cripple and even sink a battleship with one blow. But wait, with all its armament, why wouldn't a large battleship be able to annihilate a little torpedo boat? See, the turbine engine allowed the torpedo boats to reach speeds that challenged the large caliber but slow-firing guns on the battleships and cruisers. As a result, a new class of ships emerged to protect the main fleet from torpedoes.
They would have been absolute hell to deal with, man. They'll attack you and then it's just impossible to hit them back. I bet they were absolutely hated by anyone who was being attacked by them. They must have been absolutely hated.
Torpedo boats, and it was creatively called torpedo boat destroyers. Torpedo boat destroyers were larger than torpedo boats,
Look how brutal these waters look.
but much smaller than the cruisers, and this meant that they were more maneuverable and better equipped to deal with the torpedo boats. So they started traveling the blue waters with the fleet to protect them against torpedo boats. But shortly after, the destroyers themselves were armed with torpedoes, which allowed them to torpedo bigger enemy warships beyond the range of the small coastal torpedo boats.
Oh wow.
And that was the end of it for the torpedo boats, but not for the torpedo boat destroyers, which are now just referred to as destroyers. Destroyers were protectors of the fleet, so when submarines became practical, the destroyers were equipped with depth charges, sonar and other anti-submarine weapons and became the submarine's #1 enemy. And when the aircraft became a major threat to the naval fleet, destroyers adopted anti-air missiles. So this is how destroyers became the jack-of-all-trades among warships. Today, destroyers are the largest surface combatant operated by most navies, ranging in size up to 6,000 tons. Destroyers were fast ships, generally capable of speeds in excess of 30 knots in calm seas. But with the destroyers getting larger and more heavily armed,
Look at that, bro. What is that? That does not look like a boat. That is the weirdest looking thing I've seen, but you can just tell it can withstand so much damage.
the difference between the cruisers and destroyers have greatly diminished. While a cruiser should nominally be bigger, this is not always the case. But a cruiser is generally considered to have greater facilities for command and control, at least in the US Navy, which often means cruisers have more space and spare energy to power the additional communication equipment and a command and control room to coordinate the defense of the fleet. Similar to destroyers, frigates are quite common ships in the Navy's fleet. They're quick to maneuver and their role is to escort and protect larger vehicles from air, surface, and underwater threats. Frigates are one of the smallest blue water surface combatants. In the past, they used to carry a lighter main battery than destroyers. For example, 3 3-inch or 2 5-inch guns would have been typical. These days, they may have anti-air guns and perhaps a small battery of torpedo tubes. However, they're not particularly well suited to theater air defense. Their strength is usually in their anti-submarine weapons. For example, the Royal Navy's Duke class of frigates have specialized anti-submarine warfare capabilities and are fitted with enhanced sonar equipment and torpedoes. Anti-submarine warfare frigates come with helipads and hangars that accommodate helicopters capable of identifying and attacking nuclear submarines using torpedoes and depth charges. Frigates are traditionally slower than destroyers, although in modern times there's not a significant difference in their speed. Today's frigates often displace up to 3,000 tons and are usually capable of top speeds of 27 to 30 knots. One of the faster frigates is the Indian Navy's Shivalik class, which can travel at speeds of up to 32 knots. Some European navies, such as the Dutch, French, German, and Spanish, use the term frigate for both their destroyers and their frigates.
Corvettes.
Vessels that are smaller than frigates are typically identified as corvettes or missile boats, which are not big enough to have a full air defense radar, and therefore are not used to escort other vessels or defend large areas. They play more of an offense role, given that they can use their anti-ship missiles to attack and are small and maneuverable enough to avoid being hit. They're also typically not suited or capable of operating in blue waters, so they typically stay closer to the shores.
Okay.
A missile boat is a small craft outfitted with several anti-ship missiles. They have low cost and are somewhat an outgrowth of torpedo boats from World War II. A corvette is a smaller version of a modern frigate, but it's usually geared towards one type of mission, either surface or anti-submarine warfare. The first littoral combat ship, USS Freedom, was commissioned in 2008. Littoral combat ships are a US Navy design meant to replace the Perry-class frigates. While the LCS-class ships are smaller than the frigate class that they're replacing, they offer a similar level of weaponry while requiring less than 50% of the crew. They can have a top speed that exceeds 40 knots. Littoral combat ships are smaller vessels and are well suited for littoral or close to shore operations.
Bro, did you see that?
Are
Looks like it's
smaller
from a sci-fi film.
vessels and are well
Wait, what's going on here? Is it deceiving or does it go like inside? Like there's like a hole, there's like a tunnel or whatever. Like it goes in. That's so
suited for
strange.
littoral or close to shore
What
operations.
the hell?
In other countries' navies, the closest thing to littoral combat ships will be patrol vessels or corvettes. One interesting feature of littoral combat ships was their modular design. They could be reconfigured for different roles, like anti-submarine warfare or surface warfare by changing their weapon systems, sensors, and mission crews.
Wow.
These module changes were envisioned to happen within a few hours, but in practice they took a lot longer and proved to be logistically difficult. In a 2016 announcement, the US Navy abandoned the modular concept for littoral combat ships and decided to use them with a single module.
Oh wow. Amphibious assault ships.
Amphibious assault ships are
These are like just small, very small versions of aircraft carriers. Maybe not because they're just too small, but they do look like you could. But maybe it's not big enough.
used to help land and support ground forces on enemy territory. At a glance, they resemble aircraft carriers,
Yeah.
but they're primarily designed for supporting helicopters. They can also carry vertical and short takeoff and landing aircraft. Most modern amphibious assault ships have a well deck, which is a hangar-like deck located at the waterline in the stern of the ship.
Oh wow.
When the well deck is flooded, landing craft like hovercraft can be launched and
Bro, hovercrafts are the weirdest thing to me. Are they actually used? I see them and they're just sort of this mythical thing that I just thought like I used to have a remote control hovercraft, which is probably why I think of it like this. But I got one, and I always thought since like this isn't a real thing, is it? Like, and with hovercrafts, you think they can go on water and land? Is that actually true? I don't think it is, right? They can only go on water. But what's the benefit of them? Surely they're so easy to just shoot up and stuff. I guess they're really like they're a lot better to maneuver and like sort of move around and like dodge things. But yeah, I'm down to do a reaction to one of those if that's a thing. But I don't know how important they are to the any military in general.
recovered without the need for a crane.
Was that a tank?
Craft like hovercraft can be launched and recovered
Is this a tank just going into the water? Into these deep waters? How come tanks can float like this? If it is a tank, because I've seen tanks float before, but I thought they were always touching the floor. Is this literally, how come they can float? It doesn't make sense.
without the need for a crane.
The fuck?
A submarine, also commonly referred to as a sub, is a
I think out of all of these, the worst one would be to be in a sub, because you're literally just stuck underwater for how long? You don't. I mean, I guess it's kind of the same situation, but just something about being in a submarine would be sketchier, you know.
Watercraft that's capable of independent underwater operations. Submarines typically fall into one of three propulsion categories: diesel electric transmission, nuclear power, and air-independent propulsion. All current submarines in the US Navy are nuclear powered, but there are a few other countries
Is that frozen underwater?
like Russia, France, the UK, China, and India, which also have nuclear-powered subs in their fleet. Submarines range in size from midget submarines with a displacement of less than 150 tons to ballistic missile submarines with a displacement of up to 48,000 tons when submerged. And regardless of their size, they're all referred to as boats.
What?
There are three major types of submarines in
But they're just standing on top of it like nothing. I'd be so scared that I'd fall off.
the US Navy: attack submarines, cruise missile submarines, and ballistic missile submarines. Attack submarines use torpedoes as their main armament and have more of a multi-role mission. They're smaller in size, making them faster and more maneuverable. Cruise missile submarines are typically larger and slower boats focused on long-distance strikes using guided missiles. Ballistic missile submarines, as the name suggests, can carry and launch nuclear ballistic missiles.
Oh, what? That is yeah, coming out of the water like that. That is so scary.
Submarines, as the name suggests, can
Oh my days.
carry and launch nuclear ballistic missiles. If you take a look at the 7 categories of warships that were just reviewed, aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, and submarines are quite easily distinguishable from one another, both in appearance and in the role that they play. However, the appearance and roles that cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and corvettes once had have been blurred over time. Most of them now have a mix of anti-surface, anti-submarine, and anti-aircraft weapons, and their size and displacement does not necessarily fall within the traditional class designations. It's kind of like iPhones, iPads, and iPods. They used to look different from one another and do different things, but now they all have cameras, touchscreen, and FaceTime, with the only real differentiating factor being the headphone jack on the iPod.
Fair enough. Fair way to put it, but yeah, all types of warships explained. I didn't know anything about any of these. Destroyers have become the very thing they swore to destroy. Shortly after the torpedo destroyers started carrying torpedoes, you either die here or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. Battleship then, giant and powerful piece of art, beautiful ruler of the ocean. Battleship now, low poly unity assets. The iPod, iPad, iPhone was a really good analogy. That's just how the world is, I feel like, though. But, yeah. All types of warships explained. Well, now I know a bit more. I do still want to do individual reactions, mainly to submarines. And this video was posted yesterday by Johnny Harris, who I do watch. But why submarines are scarier than you think? Submarines and hovercrafts are like things that I would want to check out, because aircraft carriers, I'm definitely down to do more reactions, but I've already learned a bit here and there, like the history, what it's like on board and stuff. I think I've done one of those anyway, maybe not, but I've done a few reactions to aircraft carriers. The other boat ones I could do, but I have more of an interest in subs and hovercrafts. I don't know why, but that's just what I'm personally interested in. But if you want those reactions, let me know what ones you'd want to see. Like I said, this was posted yesterday, so I could easily react to that. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.